Welcome, everyone. My name is Scott Osborne. I'm the president of RUSI-VI. Today, we welcome John Flanagan, who is an old friend from my time at Oak Bay High School. But John is also a BC Forest Service officer with 40 years of experience fighting wildfires in BC. I also want to thank Craig Cotter, who should be in the audience today, for suggesting this topic. So here at RUSI, we often look at national defense issues, defense industry issues, procurement by another name, military history, and public security issues. But it is in the realm of this last category of public security that we have seen the greatest expansion of security threats to Canada. We now have pervasive threats from terrorism by non-state actors, the use of proxy forces in conflicts around the world, cyber warfare by hostile nation states, foreign misinformation and election interference through social media. All of this amid the impact of a global pandemic, and as of today, at several locations across Canada, significant acts of civil disobedience. But included under public security must now be added the impact of climate change, which at the very least is making natural disasters more severe. So today we're going to look at the security threat to the Canadian public on fighting wildfires in BC. So John is going to talk for about 45 minutes, and I will pose some questions to see if we can expand on his talk, followed by your questions in the audience. So please write your questions on the Zoom chat or Q&A features at the bottom of the screen and make them brief. We will end at 2:30 p.m. and we're recording this talk, which will be posted to our website ASAP. So thank you, John, for taking the time to talk to us at RUSI here today. And if you are ready, please begin.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Scott. It's always nice to be able to exercise some of the gray cells. You know, I've been retired for about 12 years now, and you know, I had to dig a little deep to come up with some information here that I thought I'd like to share with your organization and let you know about how we were used to fight fires in British Columbia. Like I say, 12 years ago, things have changed since then. But I'm just going to run through some slides here, and then as Scott says, save your questions for the end, and I'll endeavor to answer them. So yeah, I began my career back in 1973, just out of high school, and I retired in 2013, and then I did an additional 4 years of seasons with fires, and the last part of the 2017 and 18 were the last two big ones. During that career, I worked in all aspects of forestry, silviculture, engineering, harvesting, range management. And the true love I had was with fire operations. It might have had something to do with playing with matches and stuff when I was younger, but it just seemed to fit. My formal education is botany, and so that was a nice fit in with the forestry aspect. I've been involved through that time with other aspects of emergency management, you know, public safety and public security. Did a lot of research and development in emergency communications and satellite and terrestrial based, and also working with the Canadian and European space agencies. And also was involved at the end of my career with our international program and the development of training and technology transfer, as well as mutual aid agreements on international, national, and the provincial scales. So it's a fairly well-rounded career, I thought. And we'll just jump right into the overview about the British Columbia Wildfire Service, or as it was known as the British Columbia Forest Service when I joined up, but things change, you know, nothing stays the same. So the unique thing about British Columbia is it's we're the one agency to deal with all fires in the province. There are other agencies across Canada that delve into flood management and things like that, but we're strictly wildfires, and which is a little bit different than from the US of A. They they have multiple layers and multiple jurisdictions, and it becomes very convoluted. But in British Columbia, being the sole agency, we get the final say on everything and how we do it. So that makes it a fairly simple approach. A fairly small organization. We reorganized in 1994, and we went from accessing 4,200 Forest Service staff that could all go do fire control down to 250 full-time management staff and support roles. And then a seasonal workforce of about 1,200 plus firefighters. And each year we usually get about 1,600 applications for about 10% of those 1,200 positions. And that's because in a busy fire season, the crews are a bit more like mercenaries. They make a lot of money and then they tell their friends and then they all apply. So we have to weed through about 1,200 or 1,600 applications to fill about 120 positions. Once they're members of our program, then we tend to try to keep them on as long as we want. And a lot of people go on, pay for their university, become doctors and lawyers, excuse me, doctors and lawyers and accountants and such. And or they go into the structural fire departments. That's another avenue for them. So good young people, and they all do a great job. At one point, British Columbia was seen as the premier fire control organization in Canada. In fact, we used to tout ourselves as the world as well, which upset our American cousins. You got to stay in some places in the province. We have about 124 facilities, including tanker bases, equipment depots, zones and bases, and fire centers, but we'll go all through that. BC, because it's a bit lumpy, lots of mountain ranges, et cetera. It's one of the most challenging terrains, and we have the largest workload in Canada. The last 10-year average that I ran this morning showed there were on average 1,352 wildfires every summer. That varies. It goes up and down depending on how good people are with their prevention programs are, and the occurrence of lightning-caused fires. So right now it's around 50-50 is just a general way of saying it. Some years it might be 70% fires and 30% human caused. And so it's just something you can count on. There'll always be fires during the summer. It's interesting that the lightning caused fires, because we have a electromagnetic direction finder system, they're more predictable, even though they're natural, than human caused fires. We run our statistics and we take a look and we can see that a big rodeo weekend coming up in Williams Lake, then you can expect a spike in human caused fires. But we can see lightning storms forecasted to come through, and we have this direction finding system that allows us to see where the lightning strikes are occurring, and we can respond accordingly. So kind of weird that we can actually understand nature better than human behavior. Initial attack, that's our primary goal. We never lose our initial attack capability because that reduces our overall suppression costs and prevents larger fires that are very, very costly. We endeavor to maintain about 93% of unwanted fires being extinguished or at less than 4 hectares in size. This is a program goal. We had some other ones, but climate change has kind of pushed those out the door. So a 93% success rate, and try and maintain the number of hectares burnt in the province below 30,000 hectares a year, which the last few years we've kind of blown that one out of the water. And safety is always our highest priority. You know, they're just trees burning, and as long as we look after life and property and make sure everybody goes home at the end of the day, then it's been a good year, no matter how much damage has occurred. So just a bit overview on the organization of the province. So we have a provincial forest fire control center, wildfire control center, and it's based in Kamloops. It used to be Victoria, but they moved it up there about 2009. And the idea behind that was more localized to the interior of the province. Activity on the island, it wasn't that great. You know, we seemed to be like Switzerland, somewhat removed from all the hubbub out there, and we had no loyalties with any of the fire centers. So now it's based out of Kamloops, and then has 6 fire centers, Coastal, Caribou, Kamloops, Southeast, Northwest, and Prince George. And they are they look after the next level down of dealing with the fires. Provincially, it's all looked at a strategic level, and we'll get you the resources, and the region deals out those resources to the zones, and the zones, they actually do the firefighting there. We also have 2 equipment depots based in Prince George. Prior to a reorganization in 1994, we took a look at all the 48 district warehouses, the 6 regional warehouses, the provincial depot, and we had enough equipment to put over 10,000 firefighters on the fire line, which was never going to happen. We didn't have the number of resources. So we sold off a lot of the stuff, donated some stuff overseas for international program to help other agencies that were developing. And we're down to 2 provincial warehouses. They all provide orders for anything in excess of what's held in the local caches, and they'll deliver anywhere in the province by the next day, which is really handy because in fires, they're very dynamic and you have to get the equipment to deal with them right away. If we get into a bind, which has happened before, we can import from other agencies, pumps and hose, chainsaws, etc. And if they can't supply them, we can go through our purchase agreements with the BC Purchasing Commission. An interesting note about in 2003, I did a calculation on the number of 30 length meters of fire hose. And there was enough, if we connected it all together, it would extend from Vancouver to Thunder Bay. So a substantial amount of equipment, and that happens every year. Some years quiet years, so we're lending equipment to Alberta or Ontario, and back and forth. So it's one way of getting around the shortages. We also have some fire camps, 6 of them. And a larger fire will move the crews and equipment and everything close to the fire. And we've also supported the 2010 Olympics with it, some flood operations, the avian flu epidemic in the Fraser Valley, and we're on the capability of handling other emergency managed support that EMBC might provide or ask for. Contract resources, not just all government. There's about 1,100 contract personnel in the province. These are tree planting companies and cruisers, harvesting, logging crews. And they can also provide fire crews for us to augment our mutual aid agreements. They're usually configured in a 5-crew configuration, and also some standing offers for emergency firefighters. These are statutory hires. We used to do conscriptions with people, and we would stop vehicles along the side of the road, and we'd say to the driver, you're coming to fight fires for us. And we would do what's called blue booking them. We'd write them up. If they refused to go, we'd hand over that information to the RCMP, and they go to jail and see a judge about it. And there were stories back in the 50s of stopping vehicles and taking the driver away, the father of a family on vacation with a mother and kids, and it was seen as not so nice, but back then that's what they did. You could also conscript equipment or vehicles. I did it once and it didn't work out very well, so I never did it again. Fireline supervision, including retirees, they have some experience, and we bring them back to help with some of the support roles, freeing up regular staff for operational activities. Danger tree fallers and assessors, these are to allow for the safety. We've had some fatalities due to falling trees that have been burnt through at the base, and we have help there. We have first aid, mapping, fire rehabilitation. Once the fire is under control, we start looking at rehabilitating the site. So it's not just fire putting them out, it's also cleaning up afterwards. Also catering for the fire camps. We've got to feed people in that, and then fire cause investigations. The fire management incident command system. So We adopted this back in the late 80s, and it was first developed in California back in 1968. It kind of matched the hierarchy of the US Navy, and it's a simplified system where they found that because of multi-agencies coming together, nobody was in charge. You know, be a fire chief from one municipality and a state park guy, because the fire doesn't respect borders. And so it would be burning on all these jurisdictions, and everybody would come and nobody was in command. So they came up with this system called the Instant Command System. It's good for managing the Olympics or fires. We just call it an incident. It could be flooding, whatever. Allows for the smooth integration of imported resources from other agencies. So across Canada, people are trained in the Instant Command System. They come to BC and they slot right into their position because we order them up for that position that they're certified for. We've integrated the Canadian Armed Forces into it. It's fairly simple because you respect that chain of command, which is very important to Instant Command System. And what we do is we consider the military assistance as just being a military branch under their own command, but they're liaising to the incident commander. BC is a member of the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center. So this is for mutual aid. You know, we talked earlier just about getting equipment. That's all done through the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center. It's established in '82, and it's grown every year since. We have national standards for training, safety, costs, equipment, aviation resources, and it's just for importing or exporting. So when we need help, we're importing resources, and when Quebec needs help, we're exporting it. We also have international agreements, Canada, US, Canada, US, and Mexico. Mexican firefighters are very good. And then we have the language barrier with our cousins from Australia and New Zealand. And they're very good as well. The nice thing about the resources from the other hemisphere, the southern hemisphere, is it's their winter when it's our summer, and vice versa. So it's a nice fit there. We also have some minor agreements, one called the Northwest Compact, which is Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, and Alberta, Saskatchewan, BC, the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Alaska. And that bypasses the national ordering systems where we can just call them up directly, and under the compact, we can exchange resources. Along the borders, we have these kind of gentleman agreements called Hands Across the Border, where we can go in and do what's called a quick strike. There's a fire burning within a certain distance of the border. BC will go down into Washington State and attack that fire up to a monetary limit, and we'll advise Washington State that we were doing it. And then we'll send them a bill for putting the fire out, which we like doing because in certain parts of the Washington State, they have let burn policies. You know, it's in a wilderness area, and their prescription for that is to allow it to burn, and that's a little dangerous if it crosses the 49th parallel. It could be into a working forest in BC or a community. So they're very tight on those quick strike agreements. Domestic operations. I did a little look up here. 1938 was the first reference I had, and that was the Blodell fire up in Sayward, BC. The Canadian Navy came to assist with 3 vessels and a lot of sailors, and apparently they worked bucket lines on the fire line. And 1939 to 1945 with the Second World War, a lot of Forest Service staff went overseas, and we didn't have a lot of detection. In fact, there a lot of programs just reverted back to nothing. If they came back from the service overseas, they were told they had a job. And the military provided aircraft for detection flights to find fires for us, and also the defense of the Japanese fire balloons. So that was interesting. 1994, Lillooet and Penticton fires. We had a lot of Army personnel show up there, and this is when we were just switching over to our new organization. So it was very helpful having them coming in and assisting. 1998, the Salmon Fire, military personnel. 2000, the Wildfires, Army personnel again. And then 2003, a big year. That was the Barrier McClure fires, the Kelowna fires. There was one down by Vassal Lake with military assistance. And that was Army, Navy, and Air Force coming in. A lot of reservists were taking annual leave so they could come and fight fires for us. So it was very helpful. 2009, again, big support from the military. That's when I was talking to the Commodore out at Maiden, and I was very tired, and he asked me, were we going to call on the resources? Because Canada Command was inquiring, and I was in a bit of a groggy state, and apparently I blurted out, no, we will not, sir. And I found out later it's because that would have impacted on the training for the Vandus who were committed over in Afghanistan. So by saying that, that allowed them to continue on that mission and not be taken off to get trained up in fighting fires in BC. So we're well aware of the impact on the armed forces commitments by asking for assistance. Usually boils down to a lot more to a provincial political influence on it. We should call them up because the public's asking for them. And again, in 2017 and 18, very, very busy years. And again, in 21, back again. So we always enjoy the military coming and helping us, and we learn things from them, and I hope they learn things from us. We also do structure protection when we have a wildland urban interface fire, where a fire is threatening to enter a community, such as happened last summer in Monty Lake or into Lytton or Kelowna or any of those. We bring in the Office of the Fire Commissioner, our wildland fire service. We don't have the expertise with dealing with structural fires, and vice versa. The structural people don't understand big flame fronts coming at them out of the forest. So we make sure that they know their responsibilities and ours, and we work together on it. And they're all ordered up through the British Columbia Emergency Management Program. And we just put in the request, and they deal with it. And again, they're integrated into our instant command system as a structural branch directors, and they deal with it, and we don't have to. A little bit about crews. We have initial attack crews, 3-person. Their philosophy is hit hard, hit fast, and get there quickly, and put it as quickly as you can, and get ready for the next one. Because sometimes in a lightning storm and that, you could end up with 600 fire starts in 3 or 4 days, and you want to get on them so you don't end up with a lot of big fires. The 10 a.m. objective is to have it controlled by about 10 o'clock the next morning following discovery. With 138 crews in BC, and all fit and eager and young. We have the Repel program, 10 crews based out of Salmon Arm. Again, 3-person configuration. They have 3 helicopters, a long-term contract. They have hoist capability for extracting crews, go to fires if they're going to be overrun. They have helitanker capability with a snorkel for loading up out of lakes or swimming pools. There is a weight limit, so they're quite small, and they get a bit of jibing over that and the other crews, but they have to be that way in order to weights and balances for use of the aircraft. Their main function is to action remote access fires, lightning strikes up on mountaintops and things like that we have to action, and they'll go in and repel in and put out the fire or contain it, or build helipads to allow bigger crews to come in. They also do a lot of medevac on wildfires, and also as part of the BC ambulance service as well to assist them. Some of the aircraft. Paratac, BC is the only agency in Canada with smoke jumpers, and 13 crews, same configuration as the initial attack crews. They use a twin otter and turbo DC-6 for getting around, which allows for transport of cargo and demobilization of equipment. It can be anywhere in the province in 2.5 hours. and they're very experienced crews. It's kind of like an elite group, and there's a very low turnover rate over that average of 5 years. And they're also self-supporting for 2 days, and they can be supported by their jump ships as they acquire. Jumping out of aircraft clad in Kevlar is not what I'm interested in, or was interested in, but they're very brave, and they pack a lot of weight and equipment, and very useful in the northern part of the province. Then we have the boots on the ground, the long-term tough, they call themselves. These are the sustained action crews, the 20-person crews, 72-hour self-supporting, and they're also used for flood support, filling sandbags, building barriers, search and rescue operations, as well as working on fires. So in the spring, they're working floods, and then they switch right over to fires. We also have Type 2 crews. They're contracted by BC Wildfire, and these are those forest company crews. And we have Type 3 crews. These are emergency firefighters, mostly used in mop-up and support functions, primarily for safety reasons. We just hire them again off the street, and but we don't conscript them anymore. And then we also have First Nations Emergency Social Services, and they provide crews as well. Aviation resources. We don't own any aircraft. Back in 1920, we bought a aircraft, and it crashed in West Vancouver somewhere, so we decided not to do it anymore. And we have multiple year contracts with companies, and also available through mutual aid from other agencies. Very expensive fire controlled equipment. Some of the aircraft are $10,000, $15,000 an hour, so we have to manage them. We have a bird dog aircraft that provides transport, flies around behind the tankers, and they take instructions from a ministry specialist that's on board, the air attack officer. And again, because of the topography in British Columbia, we use long-term retardant, and that's primarily because after it's even dry, it's still effective in inhibiting pyrolysis, which is the chemical reaction that actually causes fuel to burn. And the water resources, if they're close, then we'll bring in skimmer aircraft or the Martin Mars or aircraft like that. And again, that has to be fairly closely managed. Some of the sky cranes are like $15,000 an hour, so you have to manage them very quickly, correctly. So some pictures of some of the different types of aircraft. We used a lot of military aircraft back in the 50s and 60s, and they were converted over. Conair Aviation out of Abbotsford, they tend to take jet aircraft now, or Q400 turbo transport aircraft, and convert them over with tanks. And they provide that slurry, that retardant from the tanker bases, and it's usually an initial attack tool. We tend to use this to action the fire. The aircraft are so fast, they'll get there before the crews can drive to it, or before the crews can fly in by helicopter. And by tracking them with GPS and satellite communications, we can divert them to higher priorities as the fire season progresses. The other type of aircraft we use are water bombers, so CL-415s from Bombardier, or the Fireboss amphibious aircraft, which are basically an agriculture aircraft that's been converted over for fire control. And then the queen of the fleet, the Martin Mars, in 1946, a great big aircraft. We also have the helitankers, saying the air crane there, about 15,000 an hour. Same with the Vertols, and even the 214s are upwards around $12,000 an hour. So it's expensive water. I'm going to talk just briefly about the mountain pine beetle. It's an endemic species, part of the forest ecology. And fires and cold winters used to control the infestations, but something happened back in the 70s when we weren't getting the colder winters anymore, and the infestation started to take off. And we had a very severe cold winter in 1985, which knocked the population back down. The beetles are about the size of a grain of sand. And as the fall, if it's a gradual cooling, the beetles will actually develop glycol in their systems, and this will actually allow them to overwinter. But if it's a severe freezing, then they'll die. 3 stages of attack: green attack. The trees just look normal, but if you look at the base of them, there's lots of little pitch holes where the mountain pine beetles have flown in, and they've gone in and laid their eggs. Red attack is the next year. You can see in the pictures there, kind of the extent of it. That will last about 2 or 3 years till all the needles drop off. It becomes gray attack. And it's going to cause it has caused a huge fire management issue, and it will for years to come. In 2020, the loss was 756 million cubic meters of wood. When you consider that a logging truck holds about 45 cubic meters, it's about, I don't know, 1.8, 1.9 million logging trucks. And it represents something like 20 million houses that could have been built with that wood. So huge loss. It's a very volatile fuel because it's just like 20-foot high grass. It's so dry. And it causes the stuff we call colorless spotting. It will spot ahead of the fire, and we don't see smoke or anything, and all of a sudden you're surrounded by fire. So it's very dangerous. And also because the trees are not translocating water from the ground table, the groundwater is coming up to the surface. What used to be a dry pine forest where you could walk a bulldozer or a skidder through, you're bogged down now. So it's becoming more and more difficult to fight the fires. Yeah, it wiped out about 85% of the pine component of the province, which is about 20 million hectares. And the productive forest land base of the province is about 82 million hectares. So roughly a quarter of our wood supply has been affected by it. Just some quick stats here, just the last few years. In the last 5 years, there's been 4 of the largest fires, 3 of the largest fire seasons. In 2017, 1.2 million hectares burnt. 2018, it was 1.3 million, and last year it was 856,000 or 68,000 hectares burned. So when you start looking at that and what the costs are, it's getting close to about $1.8 billion has been spent over the last 5 years just on those 3 years. And it's something's changed. So the future of wildfires. So I believe in climate change. If you live long enough, you actually see it happen. And 50 years ago when I started out, fires were small and they were easy control, and it was just what we did. All those little fires that I fought, bigger fires have wiped them all out now. So a little distressing that way. Like I said, the winters are colder and kept the infestations low. There are more people living in the woods now, which is resulting in an increase in public safety. We're doing evacuations. They're becoming more and more common. In 50 years ago, there might be 4 or 5 trappers living in an area. Now there's maybe 250 people because they're living off the grid, farming and things like that. And just the changing nature, like the mountain pine beetle and other infestations. They're changing the fuel types as well as the weather's changing. So we're going to see increased costs. We're going to be seeing $1 billion fire seasons. That might become the norm pretty quick. When you think about that, it's just suppression costs. It's not taking into account, RCMP costs for evacuations or, the insurance claims, the loss of revenue, communities, businesses. So it's increasing. More greenhouse gases will be released from the sequestered carbon once the forests burn. And I'm seeing more demand on the CAF over the years. And the availability is decreasing, but increasing putting strain on your mandate. Also, the political pressure. You know, the politicians call up and they want to know why you're putting up that fire. Well, you know, you don't really have time to go into the explanations of it, so they put more pressure on you. They want you to move resources from one fire that you can win on over to one that you got to lose both. So it's difficult. Social media, you know, it's terrible. You know, people get on there and the crews are working their guts out and they're just being slagged by people saying that they're not doing a good enough job. Here's a guy sitting in an easy chair in his basement. And so that's having an impact on the crews' morales and stuff. And also the increased public scrutiny. It's huge. So the federal Canadian Forest Service, they've been doing some modeling. And they're going to see a declining in the capability of Canadian fire management agencies to maintain their current levels of effectiveness if forest fire projections are accurate, as models indicate current resource levels would have to be doubled to meet even a modest increase in the fire load, 15%. So that tells me that we're in trouble because we're going to have to increase our programs. We're going to have to, you know, find more funding and lean more on our neighbors. You know, if one agency is quiet, then a lot of the busy agencies will be hammering on their door. So we have to have good coordination on figuring out who gets what. Fire seasons are increasing in length. They're increasing about 2 days a year. And estimates are by 2030, we're going to be burning earlier in the spring, closer to April 15th, and burning later in the fall, closer to October 15th, or even November. So that's getting similar to what's happening down in California. Increasing frequency of some more intense high severity fires, we're seeing that. I mean, you look at some of the fires last year, and you know, that White Rock fire there, for some timely weather, some rain, and lower winds, it could have taken out a big chunk of the Okanagan Valley. Large increases in the geographic extent. So they're saying in northern Canada, a lot of the boreal forests, the lungs of the earth, they're going to be burning up as well. So the problem is expanding. So again, just fire season length increasing, frequency, and the geographic area. Duplicate slide, I apologize. Additional costs and scrutiny associated with the fires in the wildland urban interface. People are building into areas where they shouldn't be building. You know, one road in, and once that road's blocked, they're trapped in there, and like the costs to get helicopters in to get them out, they're going up as well. So there has to be better planning on the part of developers. Increased accountability under the public and the political scrutiny. Talked about that, and it's becoming you know, difficult for a fire manager to decide, okay, which fires am I going to fight? And you have several on the board, and is it the mayor or the regional district director who's putting the most pressure on you? They're also forecasting an increase in the expansion of resource extraction activities, you know, oil and gas and mining up north, and that increase will cause more human-caused fires and put more people and values at risk. Large increases in the area burn, the boreal forest, like 70 to 125% increase. It's a staggering amount. They have huge fires already. Fire programs expanding coverage without additional baseline funding. You know, we can come up with ideas, but unless the funding's there, it won't happen. Fire agencies becoming more involved with other hazards, and you know, the Canadian forces are seeing that. You're being dragged in, and we're being dragged in as well. So we're losing the ability to help out with or help fight the fires when we're being pulled elsewhere. So I think what we need is a different philosophy regarding fire management. more intense management of the forest through burning for hazard reduction, ecosystem maintenance, and community protection. That's people will say, I don't like smoke in the airshed. We used to do a lot of burning for those reasons, reducing hazard, and maintaining the ecosystems. People didn't like the smoke. So now we're telling them, well, you have the smoke in the fall when it can burn safely, or you have it during the summer where you have to evacuate. And people have to make that decision what they want, but we have to increase burning. We're just getting huge amounts of fuel buildup. And also the philosophy that there are good fires and there are bad fires. Some fires are good. They're burning up a beetle infestation. So that's a good fire. But, bad fires are ones that are threatening infrastructure or life and property. So we have to learn to live with both of those. And our resource capacity needs to be expanded by all agencies. And perhaps a central resource pool modeled after the Federal Emergency Management Administration in the US, FEMA, that might be the answer. So we have to think differently. See, we can't do it like we did 50 years ago. So there's some questions for you. And,
okay, thanks, John. Can you just clarify the involvement of the provincial emergency measures organizations, or EMOs, in fighting wildfires? Or are the EMOs limited only to other natural disasters such as floods, etc.?
Well, in British Columbia, the Emergency Management BC, they deal with 57 mandated disasters. These include earthquakes and tsunamis and space debris, and fires are part of it. But they don't have the resources to deal with the fires. So we keep them involved. We tell them what's happening with the fire. We liaise daily with them. And what they do is they work with the local governments on doing evacuations, coordinating that with the RCMP, and getting the people out of the way of the fire. So they're more of a consulting role as opposed to here's some fires, take them on.
Okay, thanks. The Americans have one large national institution, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, and you touched on that. Maybe just expand a little bit, but FEMA's mandate is to deal with disasters such as earthquakes, storm damage, flooding, and wildfires. We have no such national institution in Canada. We basically silo our disaster response to the provinces, and it's flooding is looked after by the EMOs, firefighting by the BC Forest Fire Service, etc. We then provide, upon request, additional manpower from the Canadian Forces. The number of weather-related disasters that the Canadian Forces has supported are increasing over the years. There was 12 in 1996 to 2006. There was 20 in 2007 to 2016. And then there was 10 in 2017-18 alone. So I think you touched on this again, but maybe you can expand a little bit. Is reliance on the Canadian Forces for manpower support realistic going into the future? And should Canada have some sort of national organization, a disaster assistance corps, for lack of a better name, to help supplement provincial resources in fighting wildfires?
Yeah, you got to remember, under the Constitution, the provincial governments and territorial governments, they have jurisdiction over their natural resources. So, that includes the wildfire. The federal government, I believe it's Public Safety Canada, they coordinate with the EMOs in the provinces. And, they don't have that line authority to be able to tell people, well, those resources are going to BC or those are going to Alberta. So it's difficult with our constitution, the way it's set up. You'd have to get a buy-in with the federal government involved to create that core and be able to get funding and resources from each of the agencies in there. But then again, it comes down to, well, who gets them? How are they dealt out? So there's a lot of work to be done there on the sharing of them. my fire is more dangerous than your fires, so I should get them. And then you get the infighting. That happens a bit with the Canadian Interagency Forest Fire Center right now. If there's demanding requests for the same resources, the directors get together and then they have a meeting and they determine it. It's not the center that makes the decision. So yeah, it's going to have to be the future. You can't work in isolation. And like I said, fires know no borders. One of the biggest fires in BC started in BC and burnt into Alberta, and millions of hectares. So you got to be able to keep them small.
Okay, thanks for that. Just recently, Coulson Aviation, their famous Hawaii Mars water bomber, was listed for sale as this huge aircraft has not fought any wildfires since 2015. Now, as a member of the public, one would think that a fantastic firefighting resource such as Hawaii Mars is needed now more than ever, with its capacity to carry 27,000 liters of water on each mission. Has Hawaii Mars become too expensive? Is it too old? Or has it been overtaken by more advanced firefighting resources?
I would say all of those. It's too old. It's a 76-year-old aircraft. Great technology back in 1946, but piston engine aircraft, and their turnaround time, they're a slow aircraft. The turnaround time from filling up in a lake, 5,000 gallons, and then flying back to the fire and dropping it. We have those smaller amphib aircraft that hold 800 gallons each. And in the time that the Mars can make that one circuit, they could put 40,000 gallons of water on the fire. And they're more maneuverable, they're faster. So, the technology has changed. The Mars, she should retire. She's done a great job. And I don't know if you can't get parts for them anymore. They have to make parts to put into the aircraft to keep them airworthy, and that's part of their license. They have to, or their certification, they have to be airworthy. And on the fire, they might make one drop, and then they'll blow a piston, and then they'll have to return and get it repaired. That might take 2 or 3 days, and so just the downtime alone prevents it. In that time, the fire can be put out by the quicker, faster aircraft. Got to remember with water, it's a short-term retardant, and so they put that on the fire. They got to come back and keep loading it up again. So, great, 30 tons of water coming at you out of the air. It's pretty impressive. Knocks down all the trees.
Okay, thanks for that. Some years ago, there was quite a good movie entitled Only the Brave. And it was about the loss of an elite firefighting team in Arizona known as the Granite Mountain Hotshots. Now, the firefighters in that movie were depicted carrying a lot of individual kit in the field. So what does a firefighter carry? And are there differences between what Americans and Canadians carry? As well, what else do the Americans do differently?
Well, we're all proud organizations, and I don't want to speak ill of our American cousins, but in the United States, their crews, they actually wear their line packs on, while they're working. You'll have your water, your food, sleeping bag, you'll have some hose and other things, first aid kit. And so, they're wearing this right on their back. In BC, we take the packs off, and then we take our tools and we go and fight the fire. So, I think it slows down their production a bit. They also pack a what's called an emergency fire shelter, which looks like it's a package that you wear on your hip, and it'll afford you, if you're surrounded by the fire and you're endangered by it, an opportunity to survive it by deploying the shelter. British Columbia, we used to have fire shelters. We were the only agency in Canada that had them. And we did a study after 10 years and decided that, we've never deployed them on a fire being entrapped, because we taught fire avoidance and entrapment to look at the situation and say, that's too dangerous, we're not going in there. By the US firefighters having the shelter, it tends to make them say, well, yeah, let's go a little bit further. We got the shelters with us. So they tend to take more risks. They down in the States, one of the incident management forms that they have that you fill out, there's a box on it for fatalities. And I saw this and I said to the guy, I said, why do you have that? You're planning for death. You're planning for people to die. Use a box, you can put a number in there. He said, well, it happens. I said, it doesn't have to happen. So, they have a different philosophy. We go down, our crews go down, they meet with them, we go through the briefings. Our crews will stand up and say, that's not our standards, we're not going to do that. And, the people giving the briefings, they respect that, because our standards come with us when we go there, and their standards come with them when they come up here. I was at a meeting, I told them that we weren't going to be using the fire shelters anymore, and I was told, well, you can't do that. And I said, yeah, I can, because we're a sovereign nation, and the British North America Act tells me that I can do it. And he said, well, what if you come down here? And I said, if we come down here, that's your standard, and you train us and you give us the equipment, then we'll use it. So also the crews during the briefings, everybody's talking safety top to bottom, but when they get on the line, they say that the crews tend to be, they go, oh, we can, kind of a gung-ho attitude. Let's get that fire, and go chasing at it. There was another fire, Storm King Mountain, and the crews had all their equipment. They're on a slope. The fire was coming up the hill at them, and they knew they had to get away from the fire. They turned around. They tried running uphill, but they had all this weight. They had their shovels, their Pulaskis, they had their back line packs. If they had dropped those, they would have made it over the top of the hill and been okay. But their belief is you don't drop your tools, you don't drop your pack, you just run with it. So yeah, it's different, but they're good firefighters.
Okay, thanks, John. Before we go to the audience for questions, and looks like we have about half a dozen or so, do you have any final comments or on things you'd like to add or expand on regarding your presentation, Fighting BC Wildfires?
I've seen a lot of change in the 40 plus years I did it. And, we never used to fly in helicopters. We'd be put into a Beaver aircraft and flown to a lake, and then we'd be given a compass bearing and say, your fire is 10 miles this way, and, we'll pick you up in a week. And so we walk out to the fire now. So, use of a helicopter was very rare. Now it's every day, it's very common. The costs are going up exponentially. There's hundreds of millions of dollars for aviation costs on fires now, and, for the year. And so, yeah, that's changed. Technology has changed, GPS, being able to find the fire. We put in a tracking system I was involved with in our aircraft, so we could train, have situational awareness of where the aircraft are. So some air tankers could be working a fire in Kamloops. A higher priority fire comes up in, Castlegar. They can be diverted through satellite communications, not going through a radio network, and they can be there in minutes and action the fire and keep it small. So, the technology is wonderful. This, you can just see it. Somebody said it was like a big video game, being able to see where all your resources are and where the fires are starting, where the lightning's coming in, and let's see what the weather forecast is for that area and display it. So it was fun and exciting being part of that. So yeah, it was, I feel it left a bit of a legacy.
Okay. Just looking at the questions from the audience. So the first one is from John, who, and you may not be familiar with this organization, but we'll pitch it anyway.
Sure.
In Germany, there is an emergency response organization that fights fires and deals with other natural disasters like the Rhine floods last year. I don't know whether you're familiar with it at all. Is that a measure that BC might consider? Thoughts?
Well, they might, have to know more about it, but European countries tend to be like us, you look after your own stuff first. I don't think there's a lot of cooperation. I know that Italy, when we did some work with them and I was over there, they have aircraft, and when Turkey was burning, it was the first time they were asked if they could share their aircraft with them. So, there is some cooperation between the agencies. But yeah, if Germany has a emergency operations organization and they take that on, then that's good. And we do something similar here. It's just a lot more phone calls, I think.
Okay. Leonard asks, what is the approximate, if you know this, what is the approximate annual cost of firefighting equipment replacement?
Ooh, well, depends if how much burns up.
Right.
Fire hose burning. I'd have to dig into some stats, but I would think on average we'll lose maybe about 50, 60 pumps destroyed each year or stolen. We have a lot of equipment stolen. They're at about $5,000 or $6,000 a piece. So hose definitely gets lost or burnt up, and that's about $120 a length. So 30-meter length, and if we have 60,000 lengths and we lose 10% of that, then quite a bit. I can't give you an accurate figure, but it's expensive. It really is.
Okay, thanks. Len also asks, and you've partially answered this, but this will give you an opportunity if you want to expand on it or add anything. For many years, it seems that the Martin Mars was not used in British Columbia. Was that a matter of cost, or were there other factors? I think you answered that question, but is there anything you wanted to add about the Mars water bomber?
Well, when it came, you and I were talking earlier about having it parked out, where they were parked out at the Pat Bay Airport, still in the navy blue, and they're amazing aircraft. They really are. That technology to be able to build something that big. They're a boat, actually. They're not amphibious. They have to have berthing gear put onto the aircraft and pulled up onto land. So yeah, I was always impressed with it. I've been aboard it, had the tours and that, never flown in it. But technology was amazing. So what's happened is over time, it's just been overtaken by newer technology, faster aircraft, better technology. We tried to help the company Colson to come up with adding this gelling agent to the water, and that would increase the length of time it would take for the water to evaporate. It would actually coat everything, and it was a funny blue color, and we call it being smurfed. You put the drop down and a big blue thing across the landscape. But just the slowness, it was like a Super Cub aircraft, very slow, and takes a long time to get up to altitude. If you had a high elevation fire, it would take quite a while to get up there to be able to make a drop, and then you got to circle to get back down to the lake to fill up. And also the urban myth about the scuba divers. I'd like to put that to bed right now.
What was
the
that?
Intake. Oh, you hear this stuff. I was over in Greece talking to the Hellenic Fire Brigade, and the guy says, "Oh yeah, well, a friend of mine, he found a scuba diver on the fire." And the urban myth is that this guy got picked up by a water bomber, dropped on the fire in his scuba gear, and was killed, and they found his body there. Well, the intake valve on the Martin Mars, the biggest aircraft skimmer in the world, is about 8 inches across. You're not going to get a scuba diver through there. But it's just this myth.
Okay.
Anyways, it doesn't happen.
Okay, Paul says, and he's quite right, of course, but there is, talking about national organizations in Canada, or a firefighting and natural disaster organization at the national level, there is Public Safety Canada, same as FEMA, but fewer resources. So do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it's true. They don't know what resources they actually have, but they don't have a budget for an annual hiring people, having crews or equipment, etc. They fall into that um, that coordination role, concerned yet uninvolved. They're concerned about it. They'll coordinate. They'll put you in touch with some NRCan, or they'll put you in charge or in touch with the military or um, agencies. But we have a lot of those already in place on the operational side of it. I think a big role they could take on is with the climate change. Taking a lead in that. NRCan, Natural Resources Canada, Canadian Forest Service, they're very involved with it. So being able to provide that crystal balling, help us figure out what's coming down the pipe. It's not good.
Yeah. Okay. Kind of a bonus question. When you went through the original historical background of CF involvement with support to wildfires back in the 40s, the 50s, and whatnot, you mentioned, and quickly remind me in the audience here, what exactly was the Japanese fire balloons threat? What was that all about?
Well, that was our good friend Admiral Yamamoto. He after the Doolittle raid on Tokyo, and I think that was in 1943, and he wanted to strike back at North America. They had submarine shelling lighthouses and things like that, but he wanted to have a bigger impact. So he came up with this plan, and it was to build thousands of helium-filled mulberry paper fire balloons. And it had a small wicker basket. It had four, I think they were 50-pound incendiary bombs on them, and altimeters and a venting device for letting the gas out, and sandbags. And they would launch these things up because they were aware of the jet stream, and they knew that if they got it up to 30,000 feet, it would be caught in the jet stream and drift across the North America, across the Pacific. They figured it would take about 5 or 6 days. And if they dropped in elevation, they would drop a sandbag, it would come back up. And as they approached, or if they were getting too high, they would vent some gas off, but just keep it about 30,000 feet. And when they got over North America, they estimated the amount of time it would take. A timer would allow it to release the bombs. And the idea was to drop them into the forest and cause forest fires and economic impacts. But they were kind of off on the timing of the fire season. It was like from June to September would have been great, but they were more like, early spring, early summer, fall. So what they did was they did cause some fires. There's a captured balloon in the War Museum in Ottawa. There's one up in Whitehorse. A few years ago, one was discovered out by a construction of a logging road around Vernon, the wicker basket and some of the instrumentation. But what they did was they asked the media not to report these hitting the ground or causing fires. And the Japanese were monitoring the media, and they heard no reports of anything coming, so they just assumed it was a total failure, and so they stopped the program. Loose lips sink ships.
Yeah, okay. For those of you who are watching and looking at this photograph, the end here, and wondering what the significance of that is, that's a picture from Oak Bay High School, and the gentleman, the young gentleman on the left is John Flanagan. I'm in the center, and there's another student on the right. So that's what that's all about. So we don't have any more questions. So I want to thank you, John, for an excellent detailed presentation on kind of a lesser known subject. For most of us don't know that much about fighting BC wildfires. And so your presentation certainly highlights the impact of climate change and the fantastic job I think the BC Forest Service does in fighting wildfires. But also you've indicated, as we've talked before, that we may be coming to the end of that model and we may need to expand it as the threat to the public is expanding. But thanks also for your time and effort in putting all this together and whatnot. So thank you very much, John, and cheers. And that
One more,
concludes our presentation.
just a quick question. Are
Sure.
any of the audience been on any of the fires?
Any of the audience?
Yeah.
I don't know. Probably some. If somebody can write something under chat. Paul Krober raised his hand, said he has. So that's the only one so far.
Okay, well, Paul.
Wait. It's two other participants also raised their hand as well.
So just a question for them.
Yeah.
What was their impression of the organization? Were they happy with it? Did they see where there's some areas of improvement, or just what they thought of it?
Yeah, we'll see if they send us something, because it'll have to come in writing. Just give it a few seconds.
Sure. Also, Scott, would there be an opportunity for future presentations if I would be permitted to dial in for them?
Yeah, sure. We can talk about that after. No problem.
Yeah, I think I'd like that.
Sure. Okay, I'm not seeing anybody providing any extra comments or whatever, but what I am going to do, as I usually do, is I go to all the participants and I ask for any positive feedback they had on the presentation or any other further comments. So if
Sure.
If people want to provide an answer to your question, which is what did they think of their participation with the BC Forest Service and involvement with fighting wildfires, we'll see if I can collect that and I'll forward that on to you. Here's one. Paul Krober again says, I was always very impressed with the fire service. And there might be one more here. John Appleby says, yes, it was 50 years ago. And Skip Triplett says, very informative, Bravo Zulu to the British Columbia Fire Service. So let's see, let's make sure I haven't missed anything.
That's great. I've thoroughly enjoyed this.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it as well. So very enlightening. So, okay, that concludes our presentation. And so that's it. We'll end that, and I will be sending everybody an email looking for any further comments, which I'll forward on to John. So thank you very much. And,
Thanks, guys.
Yep. Okay, thanks.